Sometimes life puts you in seasons where the room is empty, the phone is silent, and the world feels like it's moving without you. But let me tell you this with absolute certainty. A woman with no friends is not a woman at a disadvantage. She is a woman in transition, what you call loneliness. Life calls alignment, what you call isolation. Destiny calls preparation. So if you're standing alone right now, understand, you're not losing people. You're finding yourself. Being alone is often seen as a disadvantage, but in truth, it can become one of the greatest strengths a woman ever develops. When a woman moves through life without a crowd behind her, she learns to build her own foundation instead of borrowing one from others. She discovers how to trust her instincts, how to make decisions without waiting for approval, and how to fuel her journey with self-belief instead of applause. In that solitude, she becomes fiercely self-reliant. She no longer depends on someone to push her forward, remind her of her worth, or validate her path. She becomes her own motivation, her own advisor, her own safety net. In a world where many people crumble without constant encouragement or companionship, the woman who has learned to walk alone stands out. She does not break easily because she has already survived the quiet moments where doubt could have drowned her. She has learned to silence the inner noise, confront her fears, and rise above insecurities without leaning on anyone else. And because she has learned to be her own source of strength, she becomes immune to manipulation and pressure. Nobody can take something away from her if she didn't rely on them to begin with. She becomes solid, centered, and unshakable. This strength also teaches her emotional independence. When she is alone, she learns how to comfort herself, how to heal her own wounds, how to talk herself through challenges, and how to find peace in her own company. Many people avoid being alone because they fear what their thoughts might reveal, but the woman who embraces solitude conquers that fear. She doesn't run from herself, she evolves. That evolution becomes her armor. It gives her clarity that noise and crowds could never offer. It makes her more intentional about who she allows into her life, because she now knows the difference between genuine support and disguised distraction. When she chooses people in the future, she chooses from strength, not from loneliness. The greatest part of this transformation comes when she no longer needs external validation. When no one is cheering, she learns to cheer for herself. When no one notices her effort, she notices it. When no one believes in her dream, she builds it anyway. That is when being alone stops being a weakness and becomes a weapon. It sharpens her discipline, her resilience, her focus. The world cannot break her because she has already learned to stand unassisted. She moves with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from surviving her own storms. For example, imagine a woman who decides to start a small business while everyone around her doubts her ability. She has no partners, no close friends pushing her forward, and no emotional support to lean on. Every morning she wakes up, plans her tasks, learns new skills, and pushes through setbacks alone. In the beginning, the silence feels heavy, but over time she notices something powerful. She's becoming capable, she's becoming strategic, she's becoming confident. Months later, when her business succeeds, people call her strong. What they don't realize is that her strength wasn't built by success. It was built in the lonely nights where she chose determination over discouragement. Her solitude didn't weaken her. It armed her for everything she was destined to become. Silence is often misunderstood. People think being alone with their thoughts is uncomfortable, or that a quiet life means an empty one. But silence has a power that noise can never match. When a woman steps out of the constant chatter, opinions, and expectations of others, she begins to hear something she may have ignored for years, her own voice. That voice becomes clearer, louder, and more honest when everything around her becomes still. In the quiet, she can finally recognize what she truly wants, not what others told her to want. She starts to understand her strengths, the dreams she buried, the boundaries she never set, and the direction she truly wants her life to move in. Noise can be dangerous because it distracts. It can drown out intuition, confuse priorities, and keep a person trapped in cycles that don't align with who they are meant to be. Friends with the wrong intentions, family members who project their fears, or environments full of drama can create so much mental clutter that a woman forgets who she is becoming. But when she finds silence, whether by choice or by circumstance, she suddenly gets a chance to reset. She hears the thoughts that have been trying to rise to the surface, the ones that encourage her to grow, to leave situations that shrink her, to stop settling for less than she deserves, and to rise into a better version of herself. Silence builds a different kind of strength because it forces reflection. It forces honesty. It forces growth. Without the pressure to impress anyone or maintain a role in a group, she can understand her flaws and her potential with clarity. She can confront her fears without distraction. She can acknowledge her desires without guilt. And in that process, she gains a deeper confidence. Not the kind that comes from being praised, but the kind that comes from knowing exactly who she is. That kind of confidence cannot be shaken because it is built on truth, not approval. When she embraces silence, she also becomes more selective with what and who she allows back into her life. She no longer entertains people who drain her energy. She no longer believes every opinion offered to her. She no longer mistakes noise for love or attention for connection. She becomes grounded, centered, and wise enough to build a life that reflects her values instead of her fears. Silence becomes her teacher, her mirror, and her foundation. It shapes her into a woman who moves with purpose instead of pressure. For example, imagine a woman who recently stepped away from a loud, chaotic friend group where gossip, competition, and drama were normal. At first, the quiet feels strange. Her phone doesn't buzz. Her weekends are empty. But over time, she starts to notice her mind feels lighter. She begins journaling, walking alone, reading, and listening to her inner thoughts. In the silence, she realizes she wants to start a new career path she never admitted to before. She takes small steps, builds momentum, gains confidence, and eventually succeeds in something she never would have attempted surrounded by constant noise. Her transformation didn't begin with applause. It began with silence. Not everyone is meant to sit at your table, and once a woman understands this, her entire life begins to transform. There comes a moment when she realizes that keeping the wrong people close is more dangerous than walking alone. Some people only stay as long as they benefit. Some will celebrate you only when your success doesn't outshine theirs. Others disappear the second you need something from them. And some quietly hope you never rise higher than the version of yourself they are comfortable with. When a woman finally sees these patterns, she stops offering seats to people who only take, only drain, or only compete. She understands that friendship is not about how long you've known someone. It's about how well their presence aligns with your growth. A shrinking circle is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of maturity. The more a woman grows, the more her energy sharpens, the more her spirit elevates, the more she begins to outgrow people who once felt permanent. This isn't a loss, it's a reshaping. She stops tolerating jealousy disguised as jokes. She stops excusing inconsistency. She stops allowing conditional loyalty. She starts valuing peace over popularity, alignment over attachment, quality over quantity. And because her standards rise, her circle naturally becomes smaller. This is not loneliness. This is leveling up. When she stops inviting everyone to her table, something powerful happens. She makes room for people who actually understand her vision, respect her boundaries, support her growth, and value her presence instead of exploiting it. She makes space for genuine connection, not out of habit, history, or convenience, but out of alignment. She also protects her time and energy, recognizing that the wrong people can delay her purpose more than any obstacle life puts in front of her. The right circle doesn't compete with her. They inspire her. They don't fear her growth. They encourage it. They don't leave when she's struggling. They help her rise. And until those people arrive, she chooses to sit at her own table and eat alone with pride, understanding that not everyone deserves access. Also teaches her boundaries. She no longer feels obligated to explain herself, justify her decisions, or shrink her identity to make others comfortable. She becomes intentional about who she lets in be, because she knows one wrong influence can send her backward. Protecting her space becomes a form of self-respect. And once she gets comfortable with this mindset, she never again begs for connection, chases after people, or tries to prove her worth. She knows that anyone meant for her life will match her energy, not drain it. For example, imagine a woman who once had a large group of friends she always invited to every event, project or milestone. Over time, she notices a pattern. When she talks about her goals, some roll their eyes. When she shares good news, a few respond with envy instead of joy. When she needs emotional support, most suddenly become busy. Eventually, she stops forcing connections and steps back. As her circle gets smaller, she focuses on her passions, starts a new fitness journey, and begins a side business. Months later, she's thriving, peaceful, and confident. One day, she meets two new people who genuinely support her, cheer her on, and match her ambition. She realizes something profound. If she hadn't cleared her table, these better connections would have never had space to arrive. Her smaller circle didn't break her. It upgraded her. Isolation is often seen as an empty, painful space, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful environments for transformation a woman can ever experience. When life pulls her away from familiar faces, old habits, and comfortable routines, it isn't punishment, it's preparation. Isolation strips away distractions long enough for her to finally look inward and confront the truth about who she is, who she has been, and who she is becoming. Growth rarely happens in crowded rooms. It happens in the quiet moments when she is forced to rely on herself, reflect honestly, and rebuild from the inside out. That kind of transformation can only unfold when she is willing to choose herself, even when no one else is choosing her. In isolation, she begins to recognize patterns she couldn't see before. She realizes which habits are holding her back, which relationships were draining her, and which dreams she abandoned because she didn't feel supported. There is clarity in solitude that noise cannot offer. The world may interpret her quiet season as loss, but this is actually the stage where she gains the most. She gains confidence from making decisions alone. She gains discipline from setting her own standards. She gains strength from surviving moments that once intimidated her. This is where she learns that she doesn't need permission or approval to evolve. She learns that choosing herself is not selfish. It is necessary. Transformation also requires discomfort, and isolation creates the space for that discomfort to be confronted instead of avoided. She can no longer distract herself with social plans, endless conversations, or the emotional chaos of unreliable people. She must sit with her thoughts. She must sit with her insecurities. She must sit with her choices. And in doing so, she learns to reshape herself from the ground up. A foundation built in isolation is stronger because it is built intentionally. It is built with awareness, purpose, and honesty. It is built without fear of who might judge or misunderstand her. It is built by her, for her. As she grows through this quiet season, something shifts. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel like alignment. What once felt lonely begins to feel peaceful. What once felt uncertain begins to feel powerful. She starts to see that everything she thought she lost was actually clearing the way for who she was meant to become. She becomes more patient, more perceptive, more self-assured. She becomes a woman who doesn't crumble when people leave or when life changes, because she learned how to stand without anyone holding her up. Isolation didn't weaken her. It refined her. For example, imagine a woman who goes through a breakup and suddenly finds herself without the partner she relied on and the mutual friends who once filled her days. The silence hits hard at first. Nights feel long. Her phone stays still. But over time, she uses the quiet to focus on things she once abandoned. She takes a course, starts journaling, learns to cook healthier meals, and trains for a 5K. 6 months later, she is stronger, clearer, and more confident than she has ever been. What appeared to be a setback was actually her breakthrough. Her isolation didn't destroy her. It transformed her. Becoming the woman you needed when you had no one is one of the most powerful transformations a person can go through. It means taking every moment of loneliness, every unanswered call, every silent night, and turning them into fuel for growth. It means realizing that the strength you were looking for in others was actually waiting inside you the entire time. When a woman has no one to rely on, she learns to become her own protector, her own motivator, and her own guide. She begins to understand that she cannot wait for someone to save her, validate her, or lead her forward. She steps into roles she once wished someone else would fill for her. Instead of collapsing under the weight of solitude, she uses it to build the version of herself she always needed. This transformation happens quietly but powerfully. It starts with small acts of courage, getting out of bed when emotions feel heavy, handling responsibilities alone, creating discipline where there were once excuses, and choosing growth instead of bitterness. Every day she does something that the weaker version of herself avoided. She becomes more resilient because she has to. She becomes wiser because she's forced to reflect. She becomes emotionally stronger because no one else is there to hold her together. Over time, she realizes she is developing qualities she once searched for in others: loyalty, bravery, consistency, compassion, and independence. She becomes her own anchor. As she evolves, she also becomes the woman younger versions of herself desperately needed. She becomes the woman who doesn't tolerate disrespect. She becomes the woman who speaks up instead of staying silent. She becomes the woman who sets boundaries, chooses herself, and refuses to shrink to make others comfortable. She becomes the woman who believes in her potential even when no one else does. And because she has experienced loneliness firsthand, she also becomes more empathetic, more grounded, and more aware of her worth. She doesn't let her past break her. She uses it to mold herself into someone unshakable. This growth also prepares her for the future. When she eventually meets the right friends, the right partner, or the right opportunities, she approaches them from strength, not desperation. She no longer clings to people out of fear of being alone. She no longer accepts crumbs because she knows she deserves more. She can stand alone, and that makes every connection she builds afterward healthier and more meaningful. The right people will eventually enter her life, but she won't lose herself trying to keep them. Becoming the woman she needed ensures she never returns to the broken version of herself she outgrew. For example, imagine a woman who struggled through a difficult period with no emotional support, no family checking on her, no friends showing up, and no one to share her burdens with. She cried alone, handled bills alone, fought anxiety alone, and rebuilt her life alone. At first, it felt unfair, but over time, she started developing habits she once thought she wasn't capable of. She created a routine, learned new skills, set boundaries, and built confidence. A year later, she looks at herself in the mirror and realizes she has become someone strong, disciplined, and deeply self-respecting. She no longer breaks easily. She no longer begs for love or attention. She became the woman she once prayed someone would help her become. And that is the power of standing alone. It creates a version of you that cannot be taken away. So if you're a woman with no friends right now, lift your head, straighten your shoulders, and understand that life is not punishing. It's positioning you. You're not alone. You're being prepared. You're becoming the kind of woman who doesn't just survive, but leads, builds, shines, and wins on her own terms. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where you rise. Keep going. Your future is waiting for you.